Here is a practical technique to manifest your desires. It was shared by Neville Goddard in the early 20th century. The first thing you should do is to know exactly what you want in this world. When you know exactly what you want, make his life like a representation as possible of what you would see, what you would touch, and what you would do when physically moving in such a state. For example, suppose you wanted a home but had no money to afford it. But you still know what you want. Without taking anything into consideration, you should make his life like a representation of the home that you would like with all the things in it that you want. And then this night as you go to bed, you should, in a drowsy, sleepy state, imagine that you are actually living in your dream home. For example, if you step off the bed, you should step up on the floor of that imaginary house. Were you to leave your bedroom, you should enter the room that is adjacent to the room in your imagined house. You should touch the furniture of your imagined house and feeling it to be solidly real. If you are moving from one room to the other, it should be in your imaginary house. In fact, you should go to sleep in that state. When you practice this for some time, in a way that you could not consciously devise, you would realize your dream house in the 3D or physical world. I have seen it work time and time again. If I wanted promotion in my business, would ask myself what additional responsibilities would be mine, would I be given this great promotion? What would I do? What would I say? What would I see? How would I act? And then in my imagination, I will begin to see and touch, undo and act as I would outwardly see and touch and act, were I in that position. If I now desired the mate of my life, what would I actually find myself doing that would imply that I have found my mate? For instance, suppose now I was a lady, one thing I would definitely do is I would wear a wedding ring. I would take my imaginary hand, and I would feel the ring that I would imagine to be there. I would then keep on feeling it, and feeling it until it seemed to me to be solidly real. I would give it all the sensory vividness I am capable of giving anything, and while I am feeling my imaginary ring, which implies I am married, I would sleep. This story is told in the Song of Songs, or the Song of Solomon. It is said, at night on my bed I sought him whom my soul loveth, I found him whom my soul loveth, and I would not let him go until I brought him into my mother's house, right into the chamber of her that conceived me. If I would take that beautiful poem, and put it into modern English, it would be this. While sitting in my chair, would feel myself right into the situation of my fulfilled desire, and having felt myself into that state, I would not let it go. In fact, I would keep that mood alive, and in that mood, I would sleep. That is taking it right into my mother's chamber, into the chamber of her that conceived me. You know, people are totally unaware of this fantastic power of the imagination. But when man begins to discover this power within him, he never plays the part that he formerly played. He doesn't turn back, and become just the reflective life. From here on, he is the affection of life. The secret of it is to center your imagination in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and remain there. In our capacity to live in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, lies our capacity to live a more abundant life. Most of us are afraid to imagine ourselves as important, and noble individuals secure in our contribution to the world. Just because at the very moment that we start our assumption, reason and our senses deny the truth of our assumption, we seem to be in the grip of an unconscious urge, which makes us cling desperately to the world of familiar things, and resist all that threatens to tear us away from our familiar and seemingly safe moorings. But I appeal to you to try it. If you try it, you will discover this great wisdom of the ancients, which they told us in their own strange, wonderful, symbolical form. Unfortunately, you and I misinterpreted their stories, and took it for history, when they intended it as instruction to simply achieve our every objective. You see, imagination puts us inwardly in touch with a world of states. These states are existent. In fact, they are present now, but they are mere possibilities while we think of them. But they become overpoweringly real when we think from them and dwell in them. You know, there is a wide difference between thinking of what you want in this world, and thinking from what you want. Let me tell you, when I first heard of the strange and wonderful world of imagination, I was in New York City. An old friend of mine taught it to me. He turned to a chapter in the Bible, and this is what he read. "In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you, and I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am there he may be also." He explained to me that this sensual character of the gospel was human imagination. In fact, that mansion was not a place in some heavenly place, but simply my desire. If I would make a living representation of the state desired, and then enter that state and abide in that state, I would realize it. At the time, I wanted to make a trip to the island of Barbados in the West Indies. But I had no money. He explained to me that if I would that night, as I slept in New York City, assume that I was sleeping in Barbados, and go to sleep in that state, I would realize my trip. Well, I took him at his word and tried it. For 1 month, night after night as I fell asleep, I assumed I was sleeping in my father's home in Barbados. At the end of the month, an invitation from my family came, inviting me to spend the winter in Barbados. In fact, I sailed to Barbados in the early part of December that year. From then onwards, I knew I had found the Savior in myself. The old man told me that it would never fail. Even after it happened, I could hardly believe that it happened. That's how strange this whole thing is. On reflection, it happens so naturally that you begin to feel or to tell yourself, well, it would have happened anyway. And you quickly recover from this wonderful experience of yours. It never failed me if I would give the imagined mood and sensory vividness. I could tell you a number of case histories to show you how it works, but in essence, when you know what you want, you are just thinking of it. That is not enough, you must now begin to think from it. Well, how could I think from it? I am sitting here, and I desire to be elsewhere. How could I, while sitting here, physically put myself in imagination at a point in space, removed from this room, and make that real to me? My imagination puts me in touch inwardly with that state. I imagine that I am actually where I desire to be. How can I tell that I am there? There is only one way to prove that I am there. For, what a man sees when he describes his world, is as he describes it relative to himself. So, what the world looks like depends entirely upon where I stand when I make my observation. So, if as I describe my world, it is related to that point in space, I imagine that I am occupying at that time. I am not there physically. But I am there in my imagination, and my imagination is God or my true self. And, when I go in my imagination and make it real there, I shall go in the flesh also. When in that state, I fall asleep, it is done. I have never seen it fail. So this is the simple technique on how to use your imagination in order to realize your desires. If you like this content, please support us by subscribing, liking, and commenting, so that we could produce more videos of this nature. Thank you for watching.